Hi, everybody, and welcome to a packed Berkshire Football Stories podcast with me, Tom Canning. Rob Davies is around. He will be back. I think we just haven't quite got hold of him yet. You know, he's probably he does a swim this time of year. He's organising a swim, so I know he's got lots and lots of bits going on. We have got a packed panel today. It is a very male panel, which we will try to rectify going forward for this year. It's been a long time for anybody who listens to the podcast. We've not been around for a little while, but we've got a packed panel today, and we've got lots of questions to ask, lots of questions to answer. We've got Neil Graham. Hello.
Hi, Tom.
Hello, mate. Happy New Year. Let's assume that it's all Happy New Year to everybody already. Otherwise, we'll be doing that with everybody. We've got Dan Walkley. Hello, Dan.
Good morning.
And we have Neil Maskell.
Morning, Tom. Morning, all.
Not wearing your fetching Hollyport shirt today.
No, it's a bit cold, isn't it? For
yes, a bit too
sleeves.
cold.
I've gone sort of Noel Edmonds jumper.
We've got a bunch of stuff to talk about today, from the scenes at Reading Football Club, which we will cover briefly, games that happened on Tuesday night, some opinions on postponements, which I'm sure you've all come loaded and ready to go, and various other bits. We're going to talk about Binfield, Maidenhead United Women, some title races in the Thames Valley Counties Women's Football League, and Step 6 applications. And at the very end, I've got a question for everybody. So we will see how we go. If you are interested in finding out more about football in Berkshire, you can find out about us at footballinberkshire.co.uk. You can join our WhatsApp channels. You can get across us on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and all the rest of that nonsense. So here we go. Neil Graham, I think you're probably the best positioned to talk maybe a little bit about Reading FC, but the scenes at the weekend getting the game called off was obviously almost a last resort at this point. I know you spend a lot of time photoing. I was going to say photographing, and that wasn't quite coming out right, and I realised that was wrong. You spend a lot of time with the women's team. It's not good, is it? What did you make of the scenes at the weekend?
Yeah, I wasn't there on Saturday, but obviously been there for the tennis ball throwing in on the 16th minute and a continual sort of disruption of the game. And I think the tennis balls, for me, probably sort of run their course. But this sort of pitch invasion, even though I think it's probably wrong to have a pitch invasion, but I think Reading are actually on the brink. And I think this was the only thing the fans can do. And probably with a lot of commentators, I have to agree. The mess behind the scenes on the pitch, wherever, Reading is just in an absolute mess. And the poor fans, again, as with all football clubs, the one thing constant throughout all football clubs is the fans. And I think that was it. There needed to be that sort of line in the sand to hopefully whether Younger actually sells the club, does something, just to do something, as opposed to just sitting there in limbo. So I do actually agree with the fans, and I think it's probably the right thing to do to get things across the back pages, which it did the following day, across Sky, across TalkSport, and across Football in Berkshire as well. It just sort of highlighted that here we are, a club that generally just sort of rides along, has a few seasons here and there, rides, and then sort of has a dip season, and never really causes any trouble amongst the football world. And here they are. They could be going out of business and be liquidated. That's what the fans do not want, like other Younger clubs that he's owned before, which has now all disappeared in Belgium, I believe, isn't it? One of them.
Yeah.
And that they don't exist. So the fans have taken to the pitch, and I actually think I do agree with them. It needed to be done.
And obviously the Reading FC women got knocked out of the FA Cup on Sunday. That was a bit of a shock result, I think. Given I saw them play at the end of last season and they were very tidy. I think the loss of Trollsgaard is probably going to affect them. Were you surprised by that result, Neil?
I thought it was going to be a Reading win, I have to be honest. But after the first half performance, I thought this could go either way, and Reading scored against the runner play, to be honest with you. Wolves just passed the ball better, just sort of pressed the ball better. But Reading took their chances where Wolves didn't. And how often do we say that about sort of being punished for not taking the chances? And Wolves did. Second half was a lot better. A couple of substitutions by Reading made a little bit more of a difference. But again, Wolves took their chances. Reading didn't press enough to put Wolves under pressure and make mistakes. And I think Wolves over the 90 just about deserved the win, to be honest with you. But yes, it was a shock, and the girls do need a lift as well.
Rob Davies is here in the house. Hello, Rob.
Hi, Tom. How you doing? Happy New Year.
And
Happy New Year to everyone else as well.
Oh, no. We've all conceded that it's already Happy New Year.
Sorry, Rob. I'd rather jump the gun with getting the podcast going today. I couldn't remember if you'd said you were around or not. Are you happy being a panelist this afternoon, this morning?
Happy being a panelist, yeah.
Marvellous.
I think I can add something to at least two of the topics you've got on the running order. So
Excellent. Which ones?
Oh, well, whichever ones you want. Postponements, anything like that. You take it under your. I'll follow your lead, Tom.
Well, on Tuesday night, I think there was one game. Correct me if I'm wrong. One game made it through the wintry weather, and that was Ascot United in defeat to Hartley Whitney. It's one of those ones where you obviously you want to get games on, you're desperate to get games on, and that's brilliant if you win. And if you then come up a little bit short, you're suddenly wondering why. I think perhaps wondering why you actually let that one get through when you could have not unreasonably called it off. I don't know. There's no one from Ascot on the podcast today to defend that position, and I'm sure they will. They're very glad to have got the game on. Does anybody know what the crowd was like? I obviously I haven't seen the crowd. I know the score was 2-0 to Hartley Whitney, but is anybody familiar with the crowd last night?
It was 168, 168 attendance.
Oh, okay. I mean, on a cold night, that's I suppose as good as you can probably hope for. I wondered if obviously with all of the other games off, there might have been a bumper crowd. Now, the second question: did anybody go? Because I certainly didn't.
No.
Okay. Well, we won't talk about too much about that one then, and we will move. That is the kind of thing that good prep for a podcast will sort out going forward. The big question that often comes around at this time of year, and Mr. Maskell, I stole some words out of your mouth on our little WhatsApp group yesterday that I put on Twitter, and obviously for anybody listening to this out loud, there are a couple of choice phrases in this sentence, but you said nothing boils the piss of non-league fans like a late postponement, and I added except perhaps not having a paper program. Neil, as someone directly involved in a club at the higher echelons, what goes through a club's thinking on a night like last night? Because you are damned if you do, if you call it off earlier, and you're damned if you call it off late.
Yeah, this one's a bit raw for us, Tom, actually, because on Monday we had the County Cup tie penciled in with Milton United at York Road. And it was one of those where the pitch was in good nick. It's been in good nick all season. And then the temperatures plunged and the match officials arrived, and they were concerned about the pitch firming up and whether we get through 90 minutes. So, look, the match officials have a job to do. We respect their decision. Everyone from Milton was very understanding and very good about it. But unfortunately, we did have a very late postponement. I think postponements are the second worst thing that can happen on a match day. The worst thing that can happen is an abandonment. No one wants people to make a journey wasted. But, practically speaking, sometimes things are out of your control, aren't they? We don't control the weather. And, a pitch that was previously kind of playable suddenly kind of got worse. And it's very difficult to say, look at, the weather forecast. They're not always particularly accurate, are they? So it's a real tough one. But speaking from a club's angle, no one at the club wants a game off on the day with all the costs that go into it. So it's that balance between trying to get it on and also considering where people are coming from and how much time and money they're spending to get there. It's a really tricky one, and there'll be more games off this month, I fear.
Rob, as the match-going independent match-going representative on this panel today, what's your feelings on that. And Dan, I'll come to you in just a minute as well, because I know Tadley have a specific part of the pitch that often causes you guys problems. But Rob, what do you make of that? What are your thoughts?
Well, in general, I'm very sympathetic to the clubs. As Neil mentioned, it's a tricky situation, and occasionally, on Monday night at York Road, the pitch seemed to be playable until and the referee got there and thought it might not make it through the match. That's sort of one situation, but we also had another situation last night where apparently there was a frozen pitch in one of the games, and the club account was telling everyone that the match was definitely going to go ahead, and the referee got there and said, well, no, this part of the pitch is frozen now, and it's been frozen all day, and so we're not going to be able to do it. And so there was one team in the National League South who made a very long journey and got there, and when the referee arrived, the game was called off, and they had a huge journey that was wasted. So I think there's got to be some sort of middle ground that clubs can strike, where if the pitch is in a state where it's not playable early on, they've got to be able to say, this isn't we're not going to have a game tonight. Other clubs like Slough's game last night was called off very early. I think it was Taunton they were due to play. I think it was, yes. And they called it. Taunton called the game off at 10 a.m. in the morning, long before Slough or anyone was due to travel down. Which is great if it's going to be off, get it off early. But I do have sympathy with the clubs. Like Maidenhead's position on Monday night. That's a slightly different situation to what we saw last night in the game I'm alluding to. But it's
okay to say it was Truro at home to Dartford.
Truro at home to Dartford, and as long as I think a lot of people took a little bit of pleasure in seeing a team go that far and come back, but I think it's also like with a situation like that where there's such travel involved, there's got to be some way of sort of getting a decision done early, whether it means a video call with an official, or whether it's essentially the club's having the power to say, look, our pitch isn't going to be playable tonight. I'm not sure what the full protocol would be, but when there's that much travel involved, there's got to be a decision fairly early on.
To be fair to Truro, it could have been worse. It could have actually been in Truro and not Plymouth. And I know everybody will look at a map and go that Truro and Plymouth aren't that far away. But as someone who's done that journey an awful lot for work, it's a long way. Dan, there is a general feeling that clubs sometimes want to get games off because. Or a sort of possibly a conspiracy that certain clubs would want to get games off because they don't have players, they have players missing and stuff like that. As personally, as someone who's worked inside a club, games off cost money. You quite likely still have to pay for a referee to come and look at the pitch. I would think you've printed programs, maybe, not always, but you've done that, and there's an awful lot of volunteer hours gone into getting a pitch ready, a club ready, and all of that kind of thing. Clubs don't want matches off, do they? They do whatever they can to get games on.
No, absolutely. Every game that is scheduled in, we want on. Obviously, like you alluded to, it's not just match day and the morning of match days, or if they're evening kickoffs, the afternoon of getting the clubhouse ready, getting the changing rooms and the pitches ready. It's all week. It's from the secretaries organising the referees and the fixtures, both managers, the teams, all the way down to, like you said, the programmes, creating the programmes, printing, even going to get food and bits and pieces like that will go to waste if there's no game. There's every effort made, and I'd probably speak for every club to get games on. I don't think there's anything more frustrating than having games off, but there has been times this year where pitch inspections have or haven't been held during the afternoon, especially for evening games. Then you get to the game and a different official, i.e. the match referee, turns up and disagrees with the decision that's already been made. So I think that's quite frustrating. Obviously, I can't speak for every level, especially higher up than maybe step 4. From my perspective, I think games, especially in wet weather, are called off a bit too easily. and I'm not sure if that's a product of maybe social media where, look, I'm not blaming officials, but people are seeing games are off and games are off and games are off and then expecting another game to be off. Whereas yesterday in the freezing pitches, I don't think anyone can have any complaint about that. Just purely from a safety point of view. And even if, I mean, going back to the Truro game, they would have known, or they should have known, like you said with Taunton earlier in the day, that pitch is, if it's frozen in midday-ish, it's going to be frozen at night, because you got to 4:30, as soon as it got dark yesterday, the temperatures plummeted again. So, I've no issue with games being called off for frozen pitches and safety risks, but I do believe, I don't know when it started, maybe post-COVID, but the wet weather games, I remember playing in some awful conditions. I don't know if groundsmen having a word in the referee's ear that they don't want to ruin their pitch, or I don't know. That's just my feelings anyway. That's my opinion. See, I'm sure a lot of people have different, but goes into it.
If we can just hold people's opinions on that till the very end, that does tie in nicely with my end of podcast question. I have an opinion that I feel is a rare strong one for me, in terms of what in terms of what. Because I put it back on the shoulders of supporters, because it is often supporters and the odd club account, which I think we all roll our eyes at when a club account gets involved in this kind of thing. But it's often supporters causing this problem. And my simple rule for me personally, when I decide to go to a football match, when I step into the car or leave the house to get on the train or whatever it is to go to a game, if the weather is any way in not very good, if it's been raining heavily for several days, if it's been freezing, it's on me to make that decision to go to the game, knowing that there is a fair to reasonable chance that when I get there, the game might be off. I think there's an element of personal responsibility for supporters specifically. And I know there's nothing that players can do about this because they've got to go regardless. But in terms of supporters, I think there's an element of responsibility. If you decide to go, then it's on you. You've decided you could stay at home. You could. There's nothing to make you go out into the freezing cold and wet. And every time every time you jump in the car, you've made that decision to go to the game. Whether it's on or off, then is neither here nor there. Thoughts?
For me, take away sort of Maidenhead and the higher echelons of the things. I think for me, non-league local knowledge. Perhaps everything. Let's face it, if it's raining, Binfield's off. Obviously, the old Bracknell Largers Lane, if it's raining, the bottom end was just a fog. You get to know Hollyport in the middle of the walk course. And the one ground that's always going to be on is Windsor. Windsor, you know that ground is it because you could have rain for a week and all you'd have a little puddle at the bottom end. So I think possible local knowledge would help, and you know what grounds are going to be on and off. So I think you're right. Fans should take a bit of personal responsibility and take year on or season on season knowledge, because it doesn't change, does it? It always rains this time of year, and it's always frosty this time of year, and it's we'll be here in 12 months' time doing exactly the same thing. What should fans do? But I think. Certainly at Maidenhead's level, I don't know why Maidenhead or the local association can't provide a professional referee to go round these grounds at 12 o'clock. Obviously, Neil maybe, and sort of say, look, save the match official coming from wherever they're coming. I'll go round, have a look at the pitch. In my opinion, I'm the neutral. I can determine whether that ground is good. Unless, again, possibly at Maidenhead, it's probably the goal mouse worse than the rest of the pitch, like it is in all pitches. And get some people, neutral people, around these grounds a lot earlier to call off. I don't know how feasible it is. Obviously, somebody will still have to pay for that official to go round and test the ground. But why you have to wait for a 7:45 kickoff until 5-6 o'clock for the official to turn up? I do not know, because certainly with frosty grounds and standing water, certainly on non-league pitches isn't going anywhere after that 5 o'clock. It's just standing water, so that's not going to change. So. Yeah, I don't know whether nationally there could be sort of like a group of referees going to test these non-league grounds. I don't know how. Obviously, it's just a sort of an idea of mine of why there can't be people testing the grounds a lot earlier, to give the fans that warning, and to give the club to save Neil's Maidenhead travelling somewhere or getting halfway down. Was it Ascot? Who got halfway down in one of the FA Cups earlier this season?
Last season in the Vars.
Yeah, that's how quick the season's going. Halfway there, and then it's called off. Well, that's a lot of needless expense gone down a pan there that Ascot would have to cover. And if there was a sort of a club in a different position, that costs a lot of money. So I don't know what Neil's opinion on having some sort of officials in sort of areas to pop round to these higher grounds and whatever. I don't know.
You'll be pleased to know, Neil, that kind of does happen. So the National League, especially around this time of year, they like to send a little reminder around. They're very proactive. They will expect clubs to look at where the opposition are travelling from, obviously the conditions at the time and the forecast. And if it's looking dodgy, they expect clubs to approach. They send out a list of referees sort of qualified to the correct level that they expect clubs to make that phone call, keep the league obviously posted, to keep the opposition posted. So for National League games, that will happen, or the league will expect the clubs to be proactive in that way and support them. We've had games at York Road whereby, and away from home as well, where they've actually allowed us to call it off on Sunday. We've had an official come in, have a look at it, look at the conditions, look at what's forecast, and they've been very proactive with it. So they've been good. The system that you suggest of sort of ad hoc inspections isn't quite what happens, but it's down to the club to use their kind of knowledge of their own pitch and look to what's coming. But that does happen certainly at step one, and I'm sure at step two as well. I've got quite a good kind of alternative story about pitch inspections. Actually, I'm not going to name the club. Suffice to say, it was a former EFL club with big expectations. We were playing on a Saturday, and their people were quite rightly and quite reasonably ringing and saying, "Look, we've had games called off very late notice before. We want to look after our supporters." Yeah, absolutely. So I was up very early with the groundsman and other staff at the ground. And we got the aforementioned panel referee in to have a look at it. And there was four of us on the pitch, head scratching, and we decided, look, with a bit of work, we can get this game on. Great stuff. So I was delighted. Saves an awful lot of work. Get in touch with our opponents, and the game went ahead, and we had a great game of football. Again, I'm not going to name names. The first tweet that I looked up as I sat with a cup of tea after a freezing cold morning was from an opposition supporter saying, "Oh, Maidenhead only want the game on to bring us down to their level." Just away from the phone, I think, was my thought on that. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. No one likes to see a game of football off, is the bottom line, I think.
Well, that's. I think we've gone across it there. We haven't necessarily mentioned the postponement of kids' matches, Neil, Graham, but I think we'll just leave that one. That feels like a minefield that perhaps we should just carefully brush under the carpet. I wanted to just bring us across to Maidenhead United Women, who are having, I think, a tremendous season. They appear to be on an upward trajectory. Ed, who's gone in there, has been there. What must be just over a year now. Neil Maskell.
Yeah, 18 months.
He's done a fantastic job, and he's got some quality players from higher up coming in. The Reading FC links are paying dividends. They've got the Freya Meadows, Tucson in, Izzy Stockton. I know there was one more you mentioned as well. So what is the future of that team? And obviously, bearing in mind we've got the Braywick Sports Hub thing, the team train in Reading and all of that kind of thing. It's a bit fractured in that sense, but it doesn't seem to be affecting them on the field.
No, it's not affecting them on the field. The third Reading link is Natasha Rasmussen, who has come across to us as well. Freya Meadows Tucson is on dual registration, so she can play for Reading in the Berks and Bucks Cup. So that's good for her. As many games as possible for a teenage player. She made her debut a couple of weeks ago against, albeit the basement side in the league, who are struggling to recruit players. Chelsea on the south coast, having a real battle in recruitment, and we wish them well. It was, in all honesty, too easy for her on that day. Bigger challenges will come. We've still got to play Bournemouth and Exeter, who are the runaway leaders. So those will be good for her. Ed's doing a great job. They're scoring lots of goals. The games are very entertaining, too entertaining sometimes. The FA Cup run, I think, aged me. We were behind in every game and against lower opposition and crept over the line. They're playing some good stuff. It's good to watch. They get the ball down and play. They're not going to win the league. The ambition is to finish in the middle. But we've got a cup quarter-final to look forward to on the 28th of January when we play Cambridge United in the FA Women's National League Plate. So it's the furthest the team have gone in that competition. So it's going well. His recruitment has been great. He's linked with Reading. He works in the community there. We've been able to develop a relationship with Reading, which is obviously a great professional club that are operating in a different sphere to us. But looking at the pyramid, we're the kind of next destination, I guess, at the moment. With I'm sure there's some ambitious clubs we'll talk about shortly. But if you're a young player wanting to get games with professional football in your mind, come and play for us. We've got players that have moved over to the States last summer as well. So it's exciting to be around it at the moment. Really enjoying it.
Is anybody else following? Rob, you just stuck your hand out. I was going to say, anybody else sort of following the situation with Maidenhead's women's team? Rob, you had something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm following it a little bit. I haven't been down to York Road to see the women's team this season, so that's definitely on my to-do list. The next couple of games are sort of against teams, or next couple of league games are against teams around you in that area. So a good opportunity to sort of really solidify in that middle section. What's sort of the long-term ambition? Because it looks like there's a sort of step up from last season. Last season, you were kind of more of a relegation sort of threatened side, looking over your shoulder maybe a little bit, or sort of in that mix. And then now, hopefully, you're more of a sort of mid-table side. With the limitations on, like you say, not being fully professional and things like that, what is the ambition? How far could it go, do you think?
This time last year, Ed's team had 3 points to their name.
Exactly.
So which goes to show what he did, and they clinched survival with a game to spare. Ed is a really ambitious coach. He would think that he said this season he wanted them to finish top half. He won't mind me saying that he wanted them to finish in that top six. There's a chance. It's a really strong league at the top end. You look at the scores of a weekend, and the sides at the top tend to give the sides at the bottom a bit of a whacking, frankly. That's just the way it is. So I think his ambition, if he wants to stay with us long term, I think he'd be looking at challenging to take us into step 3, into tier 3, the Women's National League Premier. Obviously, from there above is a huge gap up to the Championship, where I believe they'll be all full-time in the Championship, or mainly. I know Reading stayed full-time.
Sorry, Neil. They have to have mandatory positions filled, so i.e. manager, physio, media person, and the rest are then part-time.
Yeah. So I think for the limitations of the club at the moment and the ongoing ground situation and the revenue streams that limits, I think if Ed wants to stay around with us, and I really hope he does, I'm sure he'd look at his ambition would be tier 3. Whether we can go beyond that, I don't know at this moment in time with our current setup. But I think for a team that's been in that league for 8 seasons and they've struggled every year, they've been in the bottom 2 or 3. It's a nice position to be in for some of those longer-serving players who've been through some tough times where they've turned up with 10 players and that kind of thing. It certainly feels a lot more professional now with a development team attached to it as well. So it's exciting. It's good to see young footballers get a chance to express themselves. So medium term, this division. Longer term, who knows? But I think there's a limit to where we can realistically.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Rob. Right, the big question I think that has so I put out asking for some questions on the social media channels. We don't often get many questions, which is a shame. We would like to change that, but the big question that we were asked is as follows: can Binfield stay up? I'm always tentative to talk about stuff like this because obviously most of us know people at Binfield. It's not we're not a critical panel of people here. We're not here to say right or wrong. The managerial situation has changed. Ross Weatherstone is in. He's brought in some players. They had a strong looking performance against Ascot United. Unlucky to miss out there. I know Steve Gabb was at that game, and he reported back that there were reasons to be confident. I think, however, and I'll go around the panel and I'll see what you guys think. However, the simple fact is my sort of they've got 60 points they can get from the final 20 games. They've got literally half a season's worth of games yet to play. They have games in hand over almost all of the teams in the division, I think, except Northwood, which in some respects is a good thing. In other respects, it's good to have that on paper. They currently have 4 points, and I would, looking back at the last couple of seasons, they're probably going to need 10 wins to guarantee a third bottom finish, which would be enough to stay up. From a team that's got 4 points all season, that is really, really tough, and changing that mindset is going to be one hell of a U-turn. I mean, obviously bringing in players is ideal. I believe there are more on the way. So I'll start with Dan Walkley. What do you have you seen a turnaround like that before? I feel like I have. I can't name one off the top of my head.
I mean, I think we alluded to it a week or so ago. It's going to have to be playoff form. They're going to have to really hit the ground running and soon. Personally, I think the damage may already be done, unfortunately. I would love them to stay up. And the 2 games against Corinthian Casuals and Guernsey are going to be huge, albeit the Guernsey one is away from home. And Guernsey seem to be picking up points at home, as you'd expect. So I think it's going to be tough for them to stay up. The Ascot game is going to give them a whole load of confidence for sure. I think, though, they were disappointed not to at least get a point from that. And if they can show signs of that performance against teams in and around them, obviously Ascot are at mid-table at the moment, at high mid-table. So, I mean, there is a chance, but 10 wins, I think, is going to be a big ask in that league. There's some very, very good teams. I mean, the top end, Chertsey down probably to Marlow in the playoff positions are very, very good. But even the mid-table teams and the teams that come up from step 5 last year, Badshot Lee, Rains Park, they've strengthened and they're only going to strengthen. So it is a very, very tough ask. But hopefully they can do it.
Rob?
I'd probably have similar thoughts to Dan. I think, like you say, they're currently on 4 points. Guernsey, who are out of the relegation zone, are on 17. So they've got to make 13 points up, and they've got obviously any other points that Guernsey get, they've got to get them as well. So I mean, they need a bare minimum probably of 30 points, as you say, from the remaining 20 games. I think the next game is very key for them. They're away at Metropolitan Police, who are sort of a bottom half, sort of, they're 16th, I think, currently out of the 21 teams in the league. They're a kind of team that they really need to start taking points off, because after that they've got 2 or 3 playoff contenders in a row. I think Southall, Westfield,
and Hartley
Whitney. 3 games on the bounce that look really tough, to be honest. So if they're still on 4 points at the end of January, there, I think it's going to be looking tough. And there are reasons to be upbeat, I guess, in terms of the performance against Ascot, but they still haven't backed that up with a win. So they need to get that first win under their belt very soon and to turn this around. Again, I really hope they do stay up. I like Binfield, enjoy going down there. We've had a lot of friends at the club for the past few seasons, and it's been great going there. So, but it's going to take a big turnaround. They're going to need, like you say, playoff form, sort of mid-table form, and they're going to have to start taking wins out the teams in the bottom half, and the odd point here and there are the teams in the sort of playoff contention. So, I guess it has to start this weekend, really. Slim chance. But hopefully the damage hasn't been done, but I fear it might have been.
Neil Graham, anything to add?
Yeah, now you're probably aware, I'm sort of watching a lot of Step 4 football in the recent years. I knew how tough this level was. It's the first real level for me that just changes from having 11 good players to having the bench just as good and everyone fighting for their position. And I watched Binfield early in the season, and sadly, from all the games that I watched, I tipped them to go down, and they were my tip to be relegated, which I don't want to happen. I'm with Dan. I think it's possibly a little bit too late, but I think Roscoe is possibly the man if anybody can bring in those players to sort of bolster the actual club, bolster the behind the scenes, whatever, or just bring that extra bit of motivation to the club. I think he's the man. So. I'm with everybody. I don't want them to go down. It's always easier to stay in that last relegation before getting relegated than trying to come back up from a division below. So even if they can stay that one place out of relegation, I'll be absolutely over the moon for Binfield. But then going forward, obviously building on and say Step 4, I think the difference between Step 3 and Step 4 is huge. And Binfield have their backs against the wall, which then again may rally the troops. I don't know, but I'm sure if anybody can bring in players from Hartley Whitney, from his contacts, Roscoe can do it and strengthen the team, and hopefully, as everyone's been saying, put a run together to at least give them a fighting chance, as opposed to letting the league or the actual relegation battle just fizzle out onto, I'll tell you what, going down, so let's not bother turning up for the rest of the season.
Neil Maskell, I'll just bring you in on this as well. Obviously, it goes. I had forgotten, of course, that there is, as again, second mention on the podcast, Steve Gabb would call it the AGM Cup at the end of the season, where the teams that finish second, it's not all lost if they don't quite make it out, but playoff form between now and the end of the season is basically crucial. We've already had Maskell United. I forget how to pronounce it. When they came down to play Bracknell a few years ago, I did get the pronunciation lesson on how to pronounce that. But they've obviously departed their northern Step 4 division. So there is that comes into play. But you can't relax and hope that that's going to come into play, can you, Neil?
No, that's right. Football in Northumberland will be fuming about your pronunciation. No, that's right. And you talk about playoff form. You said 10 wins, Tom, and that's winning every other game, isn't it? They've got 20 games left.
Yeah.
Just to follow up on what Neil said. I mean, look, I love watching Step 5 football, but Step 4, there's a bit more. Is there a bit more prestige playing in the Isthmian League or the history of that league? You get to go in the FA Trophy and, the chance to have a run in that competition. I really, really hope they do it. I've been in contact with Ross for a couple of reasons over the summer, and in recent times I spoke to him about his hopes and sort of aspirations. And again, as Neil Graham said, good links in the game, isn't he? He's played pro. His brother's involved at Newcastle. Not sure they can bring Newcastle players in, but just goes to show he's got contacts. And while there's hope, there's a chance, isn't there? So yeah, good luck to them.
Thanks, Neil. So I think the overriding opinion is we really, really hope so. It's worth mentioning as well, I've been writing for quite a long time a piece on the last time each Berkshire men's side was relegated, and it is Binfield, as far as I can. There appears to be no history of Ascot's time prior to their period spell in the Thames Valley Premier League Premier Division, so it's very hard to tell, but I think Binfield is over 30 years since they suffered a relegation. 1980. It's between 84 and 86, I think. It's not quite written down, but the last time that the Moles were relegated, so it's quite a thing. We're going to need to just dash through. Time has gotten on. We've talked a lot. I wanted to mention the FA Interleague Cup, which is a Step 7 competition. The Thames Valley Premier League are in action. They are playing Dorset on Saturday, the 20th of January. I think it's January, or was it February? I've mislaid that piece of crucial information. It is no, in fact, it looks like it is. In fact, yes, Saturday the 20th of January, 3 p.m. at Windsor and Eton. They are playing Dorset. Typically, over the last few seasons, when I've followed this competition, we haven't got very far. But it's made up of it's like a representative team of players from across the Thames Valley Premier League. It was very Reading YMCA heavy a few years ago. I don't think that's quite the case anymore, and there are some good Windsor players which may well be part of the squad. I will look out and see what that squad list looks like. Has anybody seen an FA Interleague Cup game? I'm imagining everybody's going to shake their heads. Okay. Very quickly, just to mention as well, before we move on to the last couple of bits, Ascot United ladies are very much in a title race in the Southern Region Women's Premier Division against Bournemouth Sports. Bournemouth Sports took advantage of Ascot Ascot playing in the League Cup at the weekend and are top by a point. I think that one's probably going down to the wire. But Ascot United ladies are in a very, very strong position. Anybody seen them recently?
They're a good side. I saw them in pre-season. They beat Maidenhead in pre-season. Good side, some good players, good young side. Haven't seen them recently, but I'm not surprised to see them do well. And
not quite such a title race in the Thames Valley League. Division 1, which is the top division. Slough Town ladies, I think they're last time I checked, they're about 5 points clear. They've got Hannah Summers, who scored a hat-trick at the weekend. She is the top scorer in the division. They are flying in there, and I would expect them to be a Southern League club next season, presuming everybody goes up and there can't possibly be ground grading issues with Arbour Park playing in the Southern Region division. So hopefully we will see those go up. Dan, you mentioned Step 6 applications. This is slightly older news, but just to say anybody wasn't across it, in Berkshire, Windsor and Eton have applied to go up, and as have Kintbury Rangers, although they play in Wiltshire. Dan, are you familiar with Kintbury?
Yeah. Obviously, being this side of Berkshire, there was quite a few from Newbury's unbeaten side that went over with Danny Langford at the end of last season. And yeah, they're running away with that Wiltshire League at the moment. They've proved to be a really good side, and especially a good side or tough side to beat at home. So, barring any ground grading issues, I can't see why they wouldn't be going up to Step 6 next season. Obviously, not sure where they played. I'd assume Hellenic over that way. But yeah, I think the job Danny's done there since coming in at the beginning of the season has been great. He's brought in some very good players he's played with, and it's generally a nice club. They've got a lovely pitch down there. I played there a few times. And best of luck to them. They clearly deserve their time to go up, both on and off the field. So, I can't see any reason as to why they wouldn't.
Rob, are you I think you will be familiar with the requirements to go up for Windsor. I mean, there's no issue with the ground, and I think, if I recall, the ground they don't get the year's grace teams at Step 7, do they? That teams higher up do to get their ground in order. You have to have it in a situation where you can go up and the grading is correct. What's the do you know the specifics, Rob?
Not so much of the individual ground grading. I know Dan might be able to help here, or one of the others, but I know you have to have floodlights, a certain number of seats, and a certain amount of covered areas as well around the ground. But in terms of league performance, you have to be in the top 5 of your division and the highest ranked of any successful applicant in that division. So in Windsor and Eton's case, there's only one applicant from the Thames Valley Premier. So should they finish the top 5, they'll be fine. But if there was another one, and say, for example, I don't know, Finchampstead wanted to go up and they passed the ground grading, and they finished 3rd and Windsor finished top, then Finchampstead wouldn't be able to go up despite passing the ground grading because Windsor outranked them. Only one team from each division can go up each season. So I don't know, Dan, you might be able to help me with the ground grading a little bit.
I don't know 100% what the specifics are, but you're right. It's covered areas, seating. I don't think it's much seating, but there has to be undercover. And I believe you need a turnstile as well, or some kind of gate to kind of separate that from.
Yeah, I think it has to be enclosed, doesn't it? Yeah, for sure. And then there's something with the changing rooms as well. A certain amount of space in the changing rooms too.
Okay, we'll move on to. Thanks, guys, for that. We'll move on to the last part, which I have. Do you know what? I'm gonna. There's a little note on the bottom of the show at the moment, which I'm just going to change, and it is simply the last part, and we'll do a little panel discussion on this. It is simply the worst conditions you have played football in, and I had to rack my brains for this a little bit, but I do remember there was a Bracknell Sunday League game that we played at Wild Ridings pitches, those enormous pitches at Wild Ridings, and there was quite literally the sort of around the halfway mark of the pitch, covering probably a third of the halfway line, and not a it wasn't a case of you could jump over it, but there was quite literally a lake. And the match referee, everybody wanted to play. The match referee deemed that it was suitable to play, and we played. And it was a rare win for my team because we were the only ones that actually just got on with running through the puddle. The other team kept sort of skipping round it, so they lost a whole part of the pitch to play in, whereas we would just run through it. And I remember my entire face was covered in mud by the end of as I was patrolling the midfield. Neil, Graham. In terms of conditions,
they're my pitches now, so I've still got water wings for those now. Actually, earlier this season, literally, you could put your foot and you would be submerged in water, and we still played. But we won the toss and went down the dry end first. But basically, it is. I think, as we was alluding to earlier, Dan, where lots of pitch conditions and stuff like that. I, as a chairman, actually think about next weekend's game and how the pitch will be left at the end of the game for postponements. But I think this season was probably about the worst game. It was freezing cold. It was soaking wet. And there was standing water because it wasn't there until you stood on it. Then there was standing water through it. But the players come off in a right mess. The car, as you can imagine, was just covered in mess. Everything was dirty. Anything that pitch touched was just covered in mud. And the guys who were doing sliding tackles, as you can imagine, from the ankle all the way up to their sort of right or left hand side, depending on what it was just a sea of mud. And they've sort of left a skid mark across the actual pitch. So it's still the same, Tom. It hasn't changed.
Good. Dan, I know you are prone to getting your boots on. You must have a worst or a favourite.
Yeah, we played a county cup game. I won't say the county on this podcast because we all know what one it is. But we were down in Southampton. And the same.
Well, that gives it away.
Yeah,
let's go and Google the county that Southampton.
It was cold and it was wet. The rain was coming sideways because of the wind. Like Neil said, the middle of the pitch was, like a lake. But I loved playing in those conditions as a centre half. So it was great. I'm sure you won't mind me saying my mate scored probably one of the best wind assisted goals you'll ever see. A nice volley that the wind took straight into the top corner. But it just made the showers after so much better. Like coming off that pitch where you can't feel your feet, you can't feel your fingers, just soaked through to the bone. But all good fun, and we won as well. So that's the main thing.
Excellent. I assume your mate forgets to mention it was wind assisted.
He does. He doesn't score much, bless him. So he's clinging to everything you can get.
I think there's like a barometer to pitches, and that's just the weather as well. You know, when you arrive at the ground, you open your car door and it gets thrust out your hand as a wind.
Yes.
That's the barometer of that weather.
Neil and Rob, I must admit to not being across your playing careers. So,
you haven't read my autobiography then, no?
No. Sadly, I didn't get it for Christmas, mate. But, I'll sort of finish with you two. So playing or watching, I'll let you have a choice of either. Neil, if you want to go first, I'll let Rob.
I'll go first. Yeah, there's a good reason why you've not read about my playing career, Tom. Sheer lack of ability. I can remember a school game. That's how far I'm going back. Being roped into playing in goal in a school match. We lost 8-2, and I patrolled a puddle at each end. There were no referees or pitch inspections, rather, happening before those games. Soaking wet through, let 8 goals past myself. I think I should have retired then, to be honest with you. In my adult life, well, the odd 1 or 2 games I've played in the freezing cold. I think I'm far better with a big coat on and watching from the sidelines, personally.
Rob, round us off.
Yeah, I remember playing in a game in. I'm similar to Neil. I haven't had exactly a stellar playing career, but and the lack of talent rings true for me as well. But I remember playing. A mate of mine roped me into a game when I was living in New Zealand, and he said, "Oh yeah, come along." And I was like looking at the weather as it was coming in. It's a winter game over there, and obviously right next to this big lake in Taupo, and the wind was whistling off it and the rain was coming in sideways. It was so cold. And I got to the pitch, and it was also being used for the rugby team, like all the way through the year. So there was just like, there's the whole way through the middle of the pitch was just mud, and from like successive scrums basically that had churned up the pitch. And then you completely covered in mud the whole way through. And I remember getting into the changing rooms afterwards, and I had a like toiletry bag with me to like, all my shower stuff. And I couldn't grab the zip on the toiletry bag because my hands were so cold. I couldn't actually hold the zip to pull it open. So I was just, it wasn't a fun time. I'm not sure I went. He asked me a few times to help him out again, but I don't know how many more times I did after that one. That was pretty cold.
That's great. Thank you, guys. It's been a really great pleasure to see you all again. It's good to have the podcast back. And with a bit of luck, we will be back next week. The plan is to do a few more interviews. I feel like I say that a lot, that we're going to do some interviews. I know Dan's got one lined up, and a few others. I've got a list as long as my arm of people I need to talk to, and I've promised to talk to over the years. So we will hopefully get round to those. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Neil Graham, thank you.
Thank you.
Neil Maskell, thank you. I got to make an effort to not have 2 Neils on the same podcast going forward. Although
Neil, special kind of guys.
It has been great having you both. Neil, I think this is Neil Graham. I think this is your first podcast, is it not?
No, I think it's probably my second or third, but certainly the first one this season. Just because, as you know, just been here, there, and everywhere, so it's been difficult to fit in.
Rob Davies, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry, I went on to mute.
And Dan Walkley, thank you very much, mate. It's been great to have you all. Don't forget, you can get all the latest news on footballinberkshire.co.uk. Head to Facebook, Twitter, Threads, all of those kinds of things. WhatsApp channels as well. So we will speak to you next week. Cheers.